You're sitting in a boardroom with 12 people hanging on your every word. You make decisions that affect hundreds of employees, thousands of customers, and even millions in revenue. Your phone buzzes constantly with people who need you, want you, and depend on you. And yet, when you drive home tonight, when you sit in your kitchen, when you stare at the ceiling wondering if you made the right call on that merger, that layoff, that pivot that could make or break everything, who do you call? You have 500 employees, but not one to confide in. Sound familiar? Hi, I'm Wayne Scott, and today we're talking about the paradox every successful leader knows, but nobody discusses. How success breeds isolation, and why the higher you climb, the lonelier it gets. Welcome to the Corner Office Confessions. If you're listening to this, chances are you felt it, that weight. That responsibility that sits on your shoulders like a lead blanket. The awareness that your decisions ripple through dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. And the strangest part, the more successful you become, the fewer people you can actually talk to about it. Today, we're diving into something I call executive isolation syndrome. And before you roll your eyes and think this is about poor, wealthy CEOs, stick with me, because this isn't about money or status. It's about the psychological toll of leadership that nobody prepares you for. Well, let's explore why success creates invisible barriers between you and everyone else, the hidden cost of isolation on your decision-making abilities, the decision myths about strength and vulnerability in leadership, and most importantly, practical strategies to break through the isolation without compromising your authority. But first, let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah built her tech company from 3 people in a garage to 800 employees across 4 offices. Revenue grew from 0 to 200 million in 8 years. By every external measure, she was crushing it. But Sarah called me one night at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. She said, "I can't sleep. We're about to announce layoffs tomorrow. 150 people, good people, and I can't talk to anyone about it." I said, "What about your leadership team? They look to me for answers, not doubts. If I show uncertainty, they'll panic." "Okay, what about your board? They'll question my leadership if I seem anything less than confident about this decision." "Well, I'm running out of people. How about your spouse? They won't understand the complexity. And honestly, I'm tired of bringing this stress home." Sarah had achieved everything she had dreamed of, and she was more alone than she had ever been in her life. This is the trap of success. The higher you climb, the smaller your world becomes, not because you choose it, but because the role demands it. Think about your own journey. Remember when you were an individual contributor? You had peers. You grabbed lunch with colleagues. You vented about your boss over drinks. Then you became the boss. Suddenly, the people you used to confide in now report to you. The casual conversations become formal meetings. The friendships become complicated by power dynamics. And here's what nobody tells you. This isolation doesn't just feel bad, it makes you a worse leader. Let me explain why. This is called the science of isolation. Dr. Vivek Murthy, the former U.S. Surgeon General, has called loneliness a public health epidemic. But here's what's fascinating. The research shows that loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about feeling disconnected from others who understand your experience. Sound familiar? When you're making decisions that affect hundreds of people's lives, who can relate to that pressure? When you're navigating board politics while trying to maintain team morale, while wondering if your industry is about to be disrupted, who's been there? The neuroscience is stark. Isolation literally changes how your brain processes information. When we feel isolated, our brains shift into what researchers call self-preservation mode. We become more risk-averse. We second-guess decisions. We interpret neutral information as threatening. Does this sound familiar? Dr. John Cassiopoulos' research at the University of Chicago found that lonely individuals show increased activity in their brains' threat detection systems. Everything looks like a potential danger. Now imagine making million-dollar decisions, hiring and firing choices, strategic pivots could make or break your company, all while your brain is primed to see threats everywhere. This is why isolation isn't just a personal problem for leaders, it's a business problem. I've worked with CEOs that made catastrophically conservative decisions because they had no one to reality check their fears. I've seen leaders become paranoid about employee loyalty, board confidence, or market conditions, not because the threats were real, but because isolation amplified their threat detection systems. Am I connecting with you yet? One client, let's call him Marcus, was convinced his entire leadership team was planning to leave. He started micromanaging, questioning every decision, creating the very environment that would drive people away. The reality? His team was actually more committed than ever, but isolation had warped his perception. Which brings us to the myths that keeps leaders trapped in their cycle. The myths that trap us. Let's talk about the stories we tell ourselves that keep us isolated. Myth number 1, strong leaders don't need support. This is perhaps the most destructive myth in business culture. Somewhere along the way, we confused leadership with invincibility. We bought into the idea that admitting uncertainty, seeking advice, or expressing doubt is weakness. But here's the paradox. The strongest leaders I know are those who've learned to be selectively vulnerable. Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates, built one of the world's largest hedge funds on a principle he calls radical transparency. His company culture encourages, in fact, demands that people share their uncertainties, their mistakes, their blind spots. Dalio didn't do this despite being a strong leader. He did it because he understood that isolation breeds bad decisions. Myth number 2, if I show doubt, people will lose confidence in me. This assumes that confidence and certainty are the same thing. They're not. Confidence is, I don't know the answer, but I'm committed to finding it with the best team possible. False certainty is, I have all the answers, which everyone knows is impossible in today's complex business environment. Your team doesn't need you to be omniscient. They need you to be competent, committed, and honest about what you don't know. Myth number 3, I can't trust anyone with sensitive information. This one's trickier because it's partially true. You can't share board-level confidential information with mid-level managers. You can't discuss potential layoffs with the people that, well, might be affected. But this doesn't mean you can't share the emotional weight of leadership with anyone. I remember working with a CEO who discovered her CFO was embezzling money. She couldn't share the details with her team. It would create panic and potentially compromise the investigation that was going on. But she could share the stress of dealing with a significant personnel issue that's keeping me up at night with a peer group or other CEOs. She could process the feelings of betrayal and uncertainty without compromising confidentiality. The myth isn't that you can't share information. The myth is that you have to carry the emotional weight alone. So if these myths are keeping us trapped, what's the way out? Well, let's look at the hidden costs. Before we talk solutions, let's get brutally honest about what isolation is costing you right now. Cost number 1, when you're isolated, you're making decisions with incomplete information, not data. You probably have plenty of data. I'm talking about perspective. Every decision exists in context. Your isolated perspective is just one context. When you don't have trusted advisors who can challenge your assumptions, point out your blind spots, or offer alternative viewpoints, your decisions suffer. I worked with a manufacturing CEO who was convinced he needed to automate a major production line. The numbers looked good on paper, but he was so isolated from his frontline managers that he missed a crucial detail. His most experienced workers were about to retire anyway. The automation would have cost about $2 million and eliminated jobs unnecessarily. A simple conversation with his plant managers revealed a much cheaper solution. Hire and train replacements as the veterans retired naturally. But isolation had created a gap between executive vision and operational reality. Cost number 2, innovation stagnation. Innovation requires intellectual collision. New ideas emerge when different perspectives crash into each other. When you're isolated, you're thinking in an echo chamber. Your best ideas are being filtered through your own biases, your own experience, and your own blind spots. Without diverse input, you're likely missing opportunities and failing to anticipate the threats. Cost number 3, this is my favorite, emotional exhaustion. Let's be honest about the psychological toll. Leadership is emotionally demanding under the best of circumstances. When you're carrying that emotional weight alone, it is unsustainable. The human psyche isn't designed to process high-stakes stress in isolation. We're social creatures who need connection, validation, and shared burden. I've seen brilliant leaders burn out, not because the job was too demanding, but because they had tried to process all that demand alone. And here's what's particularly cruel. The more isolated you become, the less effective you are at the very jobs that's isolating you. It's a vicious cycle. But here's the good news. The cycle can be broken. You don't have to choose between effective leadership and human connection. Let me show you how. Breaking the isolation. The solution to executive isolation isn't simple, but it is systematic. It requires intentional relationship building, strategic vulnerability, and what I call tiered trust. Let's look at strategy number 1. Build your CEO peer group. This is a non-negotiable. You need relationships with people who understand your unique pressures because they face similar ones. Look for other CEOs in non-competing industries, business leaders at similar company stages, or former executives who have been where you're going. These relationships serve multiple purposes. They provide perspective on your challenges, reality check your assumptions, and most importantly, remind you that you're not crazy. The job really is this hard. Think about this. Organizations like Young Presidents Organization, Entrepreneurs Organization, or industry-specific CEO groups exist for exactly this reason. If formal groups don't work for you, create your own. I know CEOs who meet monthly for what they call leadership therapy sessions, informal dinners where they can speak candidly about their challenges. The key is reciprocity. This isn't about finding people to dump your problems on. It's about mutual support among people who understand the unique burdens of leadership. Strategy number 2, develop your kitchen cabinet. This is a favorite. Abraham Lincoln had his kitchen cabinet, informal advisors he trusted completely. You need yours. This might include a former boss who's been where you're going, a retired executive from your industry, a trusted board member who's also become a friend, sometimes a spouse or a partner who truly understands your world. The key criteria? They need to understand your business context, they need to have your best interest at heart, and they need to be willing to tell you things you don't want to hear. One CEO I worked with has coffee every other week with his predecessor, the person who built the company before him. This relationship gives him historical context, institutional knowledge, and someone who genuinely wants him to succeed. Strategy number 3, practice strategic vulnerability. This is about being selectively open about your uncertainties and challenges. Not with everyone, not about everything, but strategically with the right people at the right times. With your leadership team, this might sound like, hey, I'm wrestling with this decision. Here's what I'm thinking and why. What am I missing? With your board, I want to share my thought process on this challenging situation and get your perspective before I decide. Or with a peer group, I'm facing something I've never dealt with before. Can I walk through it with you? The goal isn't to appear weak or indecisive. It's to make better decisions by leveraging collective intelligence. Strategy number 4, Create structured feedback loops. This is important. Isolation often happens because you stop getting honest feedback. People tell you what they think you want to hear, but that's not what you need. Combat this by creating formal mechanisms for honest input. Here are some ideas. Have regular skip level meetings where you talk directly to people 2 levels down. Anonymous feedback systems that actually get used. Or how about exit interviews that you personally conduct or review? And then customer advisory boards where you hear unfiltered perspectives. Don't push back, just listen. I want you to listen to this. The key is creating safe spaces where people can tell you the truth without fear of retribution. Do you know what I'm talking about? If you're not getting raw, honest truth because when you hear the news, you react to it, chances are you won't get that news. It's important for you to seek out and earnestly desire that feedback. You need it, and ultimately, it will be a big win for you. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds great in theory, but what about confidentiality? What about appearing weak? What if this backfires? Let me address these concerns directly because they're valid. Concern number one, confidentiality. You're right. You can't share everything with everyone, but you can share the emotional impact without sharing the details. Instead of, we're about to acquire our competitor, but I'm worried about culture integration. Try, I'm dealing with a major decision that could reshape our company, and I'm wrestling with implementation challenges. You're processing the stress without compromising confidentiality. Concern number two, appearing weak. Nobody wants to appear weak. Here's a reframe. Seeking input isn't weakness, it's diligence. The best leaders throughout history have been those who have surrounded themselves with smart advisors. The weakness isn't in asking for help. The weakness is in making important decisions without seeking diverse perspectives. Concern number three, what if this backfires? Hey, listen to this. Any relationship carries risk, but isolation carries bigger risk. Poor decisions, emotional burnout, and strategic blind spots. The key is starting small and building your trust gradually. You don't have to share your deepest fears on day one. Start with smaller challenges and see how people respond. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Concern number four, I don't have time for relationship building. This is like saying you don't have time to sharpen your axe because you're too busy chopping wood. The relationships that break isolation don't require massive time investments. They require consistency and intentionality. 30 minutes every 2 weeks with a trusted advisor, a monthly dinner with your peer group, a quarterly check-in with your kitchen cabinet. These aren't massive time commitments, but they can transform your effectiveness as a leader. Let me leave you with a story that illustrates why this matters so much. Remember Sarah, the CEO I mentioned at the beginning? The one who called me late at night before announcing layoffs? 6 months later, she called again, this time at a reasonable hour and with completely different tone. Hey, I want to tell you about something that happened yesterday, she said. Sarah had joined a CEO peer group and developed relationships with 3 other tech leaders. When she faced her next major crisis, a key client threatening to leave, she didn't handle it alone. She called her peer group, not a formal meeting, just a quick call. Hey, I'm about to lose our second biggest client. Here's the situation. What am I not seeing? One CEO had faced something similar and shared a creative retention strategy. Another pointed out a blind spot in Sarah's negotiating approach. The third just listened and reminded her that even if she's lost the client, her company would survive. The client stayed, but more importantly, Sarah realized she had made a better decision because she hadn't made it alone. For the first time in years, she told me, I feel like I'm leading finally from strength instead of fear. That's the power of breaking isolation. It doesn't just make you feel better, though it does. It makes you a better leader. Your decisions improve because you have more perspectives. Your stress decreases because you're not carrying everything alone. Your team trusts you more because you're modeling the kind of vulnerability and collaboration you want from them. And paradoxically, you become stronger by admitting you don't have to be strong all the time. So let me ask you, what's it costing you to carry it all alone? What decisions might you be making differently if you had trusted advisors to challenge your thinking? What stress are you carrying that could be shared? What opportunities are you missing because you're operating in isolation? The path forward isn't complicated, but it does require intentional action. Consider this. First, identify one person who could become part of your kitchen cabinet. Reach out this week. Secondly, look into CEO peer groups, specifically in your area or industry. Many have trial meetings or events where you can test the waters. Thirdly, practice strategic vulnerability with your leadership team. Pick one decision you're wrestling with and ask for their input, not just their agreement. And finally, remember this: the strongest leaders throughout history weren't those who stood alone. They were those who built the strongest teams, the most trusted advisors, the most diverse perspectives around them. You don't have to carry it all alone. In fact, if you want to be the best leader you can be, you can't. The CEO nobody talks to doesn't have to be you. If you're tired of carrying it all alone, if you're ready to lead from connections instead of isolation, if you want to make better decisions and build a stronger company, then this conversation is just the beginning. If you want help, give me a call or connect.